Sunderland won 2-0 this weekend at Plymouth. Second longest in the country, isn't it? Because Newcastle Plymouth is the biggest football league distance, but the longest
for Sunderland.
Yeah, longest we'll do. It was a 7-hour trip, I think it is.
800 odd miles in round trip. It is.
Yeah, horrible.
Give or take. I've done it. It's a long haul.
I was avoiding that one. I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'll stay at home. Not going down there. Alex, you watched it from Alaska?
From Alaska, yeah. Whatever my Windscribe VPN has me currently sitting in. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Alaska. And Graeme, did you catch the game?
I listened to Nick Barnes and Gary Bennett. But Bennett was good.
Yeah.
Barnesy.
No?
No, I'm only joking. Barnes is a good mate.
I was going to say,
we're always having banter, but it's a bit weird when you know someone personally and they're and you actually hear them doing commentary. I mean, I never used to hear them doing commentary because I was always covering the game, so it's a bit weird listening to the two of them.
I saw him picking on you before about missing the first goal at home park.
Well, it's a long story. That if we've got time, I'll tell it. But that was an
Which one was that? Is that 2007?
I don't know. I have no idea what the year was. It might have been a bit earlier than that.
Played them under Mick McCarthy. Yeah, and then we would have played them under Roy Keane as well.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things where you miss 5 minutes of one game in 20 years and you never hear the end of it. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like it's they'll love to bring that up, Barnesy. But yeah, we're always giving each other stick. But then that was always half the fun of being in the North East press pack. You know, sort of sometimes, especially in tough seasons, you need a bit of gallows humour to keep you going. And there was always good banter on the trips. So even some of those long trips, and fans will be the same. You know, sort of when they make the long trips, half the fun, even on those long trips, can be the banter you have.
Yeah. Half the fun's the trip itself, especially when you watch Sunderland get beat.
Yeah, it's usually pretty good until 3 o'clock, and then it's like, what have I come here for? But the press. I will say that different clubs have different press corps, but ours was always a really good one. We used to have a phrase, "Never leave a man down." People looked after each other, which is a good thing. So all the banter you see is just banter.
True, very true. All banter on them away trips. That's the perfect time to bond. You've got a new book coming out, Graeme. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's I co-authored it with Rob Mason, who's the club historian and magazine, the programme editor. Everyone will know Rob. I think he's coming on. He's
been on the podcast. It hasn't been released yet, but that will be coming out soon.
Yeah, and Lance Hardy. I don't know if you've ever met Lance, but Lance wrote Stoke or Sunderland in '73, and this is the third in the series. It's Tales from the Red and Whites. The first one, which we all collaborated on, was a collection of tales generally about Sunderland from journalists and from players and ex-players. Gary Rowell, I did wrote Gary Rowell's chapter in that one, as well as doing a piece on Quinn and Phillips. Second one was players, 1 to 11 chapters, 1 to 11 players, goalkeeper all the way through to strikers. And this is the third one in the series. This is the managers, which is more of a challenge because you can get players quite easily, but getting managers to come and have a long chat with you is never easy. So we're really pleased with it. We've each done 2 chapters each and done 6 managers in total. And 2 of the managers, Reid and Martin Crosby, are coming up for the launch, which is on Friday, November the 16th at the Stadium of Light.
So who did you write on? Which were the managers?
I did Peter Reid and I did Simon Grayson. And Rob did Ken Knighton. Lance did Malcolm Crosby. Lance did Poyet, which means that Rob did
Laurie.
Yeah. Laurie, and I shouldn't let Laurie slip. I can hear people booing whenever you say Laurie McMenemy even now. But that was the first interview with Laurie in about 40 years that he's really properly done on Sunderland. So that's probably the biggest coup of the book, that is, and Rob did that. And
he must be some age now.
He's 80. He's either 80 or 82. So he really. I mean, maybe he just wanted to get off his chest. I didn't think that had any chance of getting Laurie. I just thought he'd say no, and in fact, I think his family suggested he say no. His family said don't do it. So I was really pleased that he did do it. A lot of these chapters, we just wanted to get the managers' honest thoughts about, so the history's fairly well known, but we want to go out and say, well, what did you really think about that, or what was really happening, or we were watching from the outside and this appeared to be the case. What was the case? Now, because of that, to a certain extent, this is a bit of I wouldn't say a non-critical element, but say Laurie Mack's chapter, for example, it was more important that Laurie Mack's thoughts and opinions are heard than, say, Rob or one of us going, well, that was rubbish, or that was crap, or that was no. You had to just sort of say, right, okay, and that's the good thing about the book is you've got the thoughts and opinions and feelings of those managers looking back on their time, and you might not agree with them, but the great thing is they're there on paper and you can read them and either disagree or agree with them as much as you want to. And also there's a few explanations sometimes about what was really happening behind the scenes, which even when I was reading some of the chapters, even I found fascinating, because often even if you're a journalist quite close to it, you don't quite know sometimes the ins and outs of what's going on.
It would have been different for you as well, because Peter Reid you will have worked with, but Grayson, I don't see why you would ever have had any dealings with.
That worked really well for us in an unexpected way. Reedy, I was probably, I was very close to Reedy in terms of the relationship we developed. I got banned a few times, usually unfairly, but I got we had our fallouts occasionally. I say you used to dread Monday morning. You get a phone call occasionally, and it'd be, "Hi, Graeme, I've got Peter for you." And I think, "Oh no, this isn't going to end well." And he'd take exception to something I might have written like about the match or whatever. But I got on really well with him, and it was. He spent a whole afternoon with me. It was great. He was giving me a lot of his time, 3 or 4 hours, and we went through everything. With Reid, it was fairly easy because we were talking about, like if you were talking with your mates, you're talking about things that you all know have happened. Grayson was harder, because I'd left the Echo by the time Grayson started. And because of that, I did a lot more research, and I was thinking to myself, I wonder how this is going to go, because you're meeting someone you don't really know, and it's quite an intimate thing, an interview where you're asking them forensic things. You've got to ask them to trust you a lot, really. But he was brilliant and very open. I really liked that. I came away thinking, wow, that was a really, really good interview.
So when's the book due out?
It's
on Amazon pre-order, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, I brought a couple of the copies of the old books in, which I know doesn't work very well on podcast at all, really. But I can't bring the new book out because it's at the printers now. There you go. I'm handing the books out to the boys as we speak.
Thank you.
It's at the printers, but I think the first time it'll be physically available to get in your hands will be that launch on Friday, November the 16th at the stadium. And I'll put a link for the podcast for people to click if they want to buy tickets, because Reid and Crosby, Peter Reid especially, normally does all the bigger venues, whereas it'll be more like an unplugged acoustic thing, I think, really, sort of stuff. It'll be kind of a quieter thing, so chance to kind of meet him and have a chat with him, really.
Yeah, be good. I'll probably come down now. I'm aware. Cool. I saw it yesterday actually advertised when I was checking your Twitter page. So
you'd be most welcome.
Yeah. So do you want to give a little bit of background about your life? Obviously, Graeme Anderson, people know you as the Sunderland Echo writer, but are you a Sunderland fan growing up? Are you from here? I mean,
I'm from County Durham. I was born in Hasswell, a village called Hasswell, out in the sticks. And it was weird, really. I'm a lad from County Durham, but everyone thinks I'm from Sunderland because I covered the club for many years. Worked for the Echo from 1987 onwards. Wasn't a plan. I started working on a free newspaper in Lichfield and then went for a weekly newspaper in Folkestone when the Herald of Free Enterprise and the Great Storm of Kent was on. That was a long time ago now. Covered that as a young journalist, and then I came back to the Sunderland Echo because that was the next step as I was heading up the tree, I thought. But I loved it and I stayed, and I had such a good time. Journalism in those days was just such fun. And I got the Sunderland job in 95. I was only the fourth Sunderland writer in 100 years. I think in the book, my claim to fame is I've written more words on Sunderland Football Club than anyone who's ever lived as a journalist. It's quite an intense period. And I left in 2014. So I saw an awful lot of managers and an awful lot of things during my time there. And it was a privilege.
Do you ever miss it?
Occasionally. I mean, I've got to say I had twang yesterday when I was getting stick from Barnsley and Benno, and I'm in a WhatsApp group which has got Richard Manierian, who's at the Echo, and James Hunter at the Chronicle, and Chris Young. Chris Young set it up. Yeah. Chris Young was a guy who took over from me.
He's in LA now, isn't he?
He's back in England now.
Oh, is he?
He's lurking in London. He's lurking in London. Which I think Barnsley met up with him. Met up with Youngie on the Sunday after the Plymouth Argyle game today at the Betchman's Arms in just outside King's Cross. So when I saw Betchman's Arms just outside King's Cross, then I missed it. You know what I mean? Because the away trips sometimes were really good fun. So I don't really miss the day-to-day side of things. And I think I was lucky. I think I got the best times of it in the sense that as I was coming in the 90s, you were still able to be mates with the players. Yeah, I mean, in those first 2 or 3 years, I had the telephone number of every player, and I could ring them up any time I wanted to. It was great. So if I was struggling for a back, you've got to bear in mind you're looking for a back page every day, right? And they don't write themselves, sort of stuff. And you've got to kind of have ideas all the time. It's blank space every day, you know what I mean? Sort of. So to be able to have the players' telephone numbers or the manager's telephone numbers, to be able to ring them up and just ask them a question, that was great. And then as time moved on, and the business grew, and the kind of whole media side of things changed, and the press offices and the club's kind of control grew, it became harder and harder to develop those relationships with players. So, but at the same time, it's still a fantastic job now. It's still a great privilege to have.
I heard a story about you covering the 92 Cup final, and I think it was from Simon O'Rourke, and he said that you are absolutely buzzing because you weren't on the sports desk at that time, and they'd ask you to cover it from in the crowd.
Yeah.
And he was telling us that it was the best thing for you because you didn't normally get to go at the Sunderland games.
Oh, I love the cup run because I enjoyed it as a fan, and that was where I really got a sense of what a privilege it was, because I was there for the Chelsea game, one where the famous one at Roker Park, where Gordon Armstrong headed the ball, rose majestically to head the ball past the despairing arm of David Besson, and we came back. We walked back across the bridge to Chaplin's, and we had loads to drink, me and my mates. And we were writing the story. We were allowed to write the front page the next day, me and a lad called Andy Barker. And I've still got the actual front page at home. It's got by Andy Barker and Graeme Anderson on. And we were laughing because it had been such a fun. We were on such a high after that game, and we kept sort of joking about, do you remember the moment when Gordon Armstrong rose majestically to head the ball past the despairing arm of David Besson? And then we rolled into work the next day and had to write the front page. So I wrote, the moment when Gordon Armstrong rose majestically to head the ball past it. We just laughed all day about the fact that this thing that we'd been saying in the pub was now on the front page. But then we ended up, you're right, Simon's right, we ended up sort of trying to wangle ourselves this trip to Wembley, and really it only took one news reporter, but somehow we convinced them, me and Andy convinced, you really need to. You've got to cover every angle. So we got this trip to London, and then we were told that, because what was going to happen was there was going to be the bus tour was when the team would come back on the next day, there was going to be a bus with the players on, open top bus around side, which is going to go into London and into Sunderland. Sorry, well, there was a media bus in front of that. And I remember the news, it was me and Andy were leaving for the FA Cup final, trying to look professional, but like really thinking, come on. As we were leaving, Helen Stewart was the news editor, said, right lads, enjoy yourself in London, but if you're not on that bus at midday on the Sunday, your P45s will be in reception. So, and it was a near-run thing catching that bus. But yeah, it was just that's the sort of time. Sometimes when you're, and the lads who are doing the Sunderland Echo now will tell you, and the other North East press lads, sometimes during a long season it's just a real slog and it's no fun, particularly when the team's doing really bad. But Simon O'Rourke's quite right. You live for those sort of the good moments and the good times. And during the Peter Reid era, there were so many good times, and I used to try and tell people, look, enjoy this. People would be like, well, what about this and what about that? And giving promotion, what about this sort of stuff? And I just enjoy the good times while they're there. And just right now, these 5-6 wins in a row, I know everyone's, what about this and what about that? But pitchers try and enjoy it because the fallow periods regularly happen. So just enjoy the good times while they last. And that 1992 FA Cup final was, well, up until it kicked off. Yeah. That was a really that run was really great with Johnny Byrne.
Apart from writing loads of stuff, I presume you're still doing that now. What else do you do these days?
Left the Echo in 2014. It was the right time to go. The papers were declining, the readerships were declining, and as I say, football had changed. And I'm a late life father, so I had a baby daughter, 4-year-old, and I wanted to see her grow up. And it was always 24/7 the job, but with Facebook and Twitter and the web, it was booming more. So I left, and for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been building a business, GSA Media, which is a PR company, and I basically a freelance journalist and a PR person, so I divide my time. The freelance journalism market it's not really a vast amount of money around it, so you've supplemented by doing the PR side of things. But one of the pleasures I've had is since I left the Echo, I've been able to work for all the national newspapers. You can only work for the one paper if you contracted that, and I've worked for everything from the Times, the Observer, the Guardian at the top end to kind of like the Sun and the Daily Star and the Sunday Sport at the bottom end. So that kind of that felt that it's a different type of journalism. It's but it's good to test yourself doing those different things.
Is that all sport as well? All football?
All sport, yeah. But then I never used to be fond of the PR. I think PR were the first two words of prostitute, and you're kind of prostituting your talents to kind of to do PR. But I'm lucky enough that the people I work with are a lot of them are former Sunderland business people I know from the old days. So they're all kind of mates anyway. So my clients tend to be people I get on with. So I don't have the boss figure that you kind of you dread. So it's good fun. But writing this book kind of brings it all back. So I have missed it a little bit more lately, and a bit like when Keegan packed in and he spent 4 years on a golf course and then came back. I think I wouldn't mind being a bit more involved than I have been lately.
Okay, we'll jump onto the match yesterday. So Sunderland lined up, and I love the way you do this, Alex, because you're the only writer on ROKER Report that puts the starting 11 in the match report.
Well, yeah, it's a staple.
I know, you need to get on, because Gav and Jimmy don't do that. And
No. I'll have words with both of them once I leave the studio today. Don't you worry.
It's just annoying. I mean, I understand you put the player ratings in, so you get the starting 11 later on. But
yeah, well, just a nice sort of uniform structure goes a long way for the match report, I feel.
Yeah.
Does he put them in the starting order, or is
in the starting order? Yeah. I'm also
class.
One of my biggest pet peeves is when any media outlet puts the first 4 defenders on the team sheet. They put them sometimes left back, right back, centre back, centre back. I'm really against that. I like left, centre, right. I just feel like that's
the worst crime
is
where the clubs put out the team sheet and they just put the squad numbers. Oh. So you sort of start at 1 and go up to sort of 70 or whatever it's going to be, but you get no sense of who goes where.
Oh, yeah. Or just the surnames, because when I'm researching, like obviously now that we're in League One, 10 out of 11 names on the starting 11 aren't, household names that you remember.
Yeah.
So, if a team's Twitter page puts out just surnames like Plymouth did yesterday, you've then got to go to the wiki, look for the first names, and it's really just the pinnacle of first world problems, or the epitome, as the case may be.
Yeah. Well, I remember going to a Watford game once, Watford away it was, and the team sheet came out, and I'd been a frantic week. I hadn't much chance to really sort of do my research particularly, but their goalkeeper was called Willie Garrett, and I just got a fit of the giggles. Willie Garrett, what a perfect name for a goalkeeper. And I was laughing. I was like, probably overreacting, a bit hysterical. I just thought it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And their press officer with a Cockney, I'll not even try the Cockney accent, but he was like, what are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? I said, Millwall, Watford, I can't remember. But basically I said, your goalkeeper, look him up now. Your goalkeeper, but his name is William Jarret. Apparently, it's William, and then Jarret is GEURET or something like that. So
he played as a goalkeeper. He played for Millwall.
Millwall, yeah.
He played 15 games for Millwall.
Yeah, Willie Garrett.
2004, yeah. Willie Julie Garrett.
Jarret, he probably pronounced it. I don't know,
probably.
Like Eric Roy or Eric Wah, but Willie Garrett. Perfect name for a goalkeeper.
There we are. He finished up at Kettering Town in 2011.
No, he didn't get it.
Yeah.
No, he didn't quite get it, did he?
Yeah, he did win the Football League trophy though with Milton Keynes in 2000.
Oh, well, he got it then.
Yeah, so that's good. You always learn something new every day. I never heard of Willie Gouret or Garrett.
Well in, Willie. Well
anyway,
done,
lineups where I was before I was given Alex Scotland. John McLaughlin in nets, and then from right to left, as Alex said, it would be Adam Matthews, Tom Flanagan, Jack Baldwin, Reece James.
In order.
Yeah, midfield, Honeyman, McGeoch. Honeyman sitting, unlike usual, where he's behind the striker. Wings, Lyndon Gooch, McGeady down the middle, Maguire on the other flank, and then Josh Madger up front. First half, I would say probably the better side, Alex. Would you say that was fair?
I would say we probably were the better side. I don't think by an awful lot. I think it was a very entertaining first half, very well contested. I think both teams played the ball on the ground. Both looked dangerous going forward.
You jumped at the analysis early. I was really just asking if you thought we shaded it there.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I think we did shade it. So next question.
Okay, second half, took the lead through in Aidan McGeady. Beauty, he dribbled it past dribbled it along a couple of players.
Yeah, he sort of like sauntered his way across, feinted a bit. then hit the perler.
Yeah, it was a wonderful finish right in front of the lads' fans. I was very disappointed he didn't celebrate in front of the away fans. I don't know if it's just me. I always want the away player, because I imagine in my head when I score that goal for Sunderland in front of the away end, I'm running into the away end almost. Like I'm sliding in front of them. I'm going nuts.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not too late, Connor. You know,
you think it's still a chance.
Drop a couple of stone, you're all right.
I can have a really good one and a really bad one, both at St James's Park. But that one where Brini scores the penalty and goes on the stand, that's as good as it gets, I think. And then the St James's Park in the 90s, where the away fans were banned.
Was that the 1-1 Mickey Gray?
Yeah, the 1-1 Mickey Gray. Mickey Gray scored and didn't know it. He wanted to run the fans. There's no fans there, so he ran to the centre circle. Weird.
Yeah, I would have run to the manager, me. That would be my...
You have to go somewhere. I think you'd go to the manager, like...
Oh, that's what I dream about at night. That's what I do. Luke O'Nien came on and won a penalty, which I've seen some Plymouth fans whinging about that, and for me it was a stonewaller.
Oh, absolutely.
McGeady then scored to make it 2-0. Again, didn't really celebrate in front of the away fans.
No,
disappointing.
2 opportunities, 2 squandered.
Yeah. So I want to start firstly with John McLaughlin, because he made a couple of brilliant saves yesterday.
Yep.
So, I mean, really just how good has he been and how good was he yesterday?
He's been... I think he started the season quite average for a League One keeper. I think at first when we signed him, I thought, right, we've signed a pretty standard keeper.
Which is fine, because we had three
because we had 3 absolute clowns on a carousel last season. So to have one competent goalkeeper, well, to have one what we thought was just a competent goalkeeper at the start, it was quite reassuring. I thought, okay, we can get by with this guy. Might have to chuck him maybe when we're pushing for promotion in the Championship if we get to that. But as the season's come on, he's just got exponentially better. And the past 2 or 3 games especially, he's looked like an absolute world beater. That save from that free kick in the second half yesterday is as good as any you'll see in the Premier League. So, if you've got a keeper who can do that, then, really you've got a keeper fit for a team fitting top of this league.
Graeme, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the keepers are so important, and Rob Mason, he's written a book about. He's a big fan of that sort of the Sunderland number ones was the book. He's so strong about how important keepers are to you, and I agree with him. And if you look back at last season with Camp and Steele and Rutter, it's probably Rob would probably say that's the worst season ever in the history of the club in terms of the quality of the goalkeepers.
I agree.
And no surprise that they went down. And McLaughlin's been brilliant, really good. I mean, sort of the fans I talk to, I think week by week they're more and more impressed by him, and he's saving you points.
Penalties as well. He saved a couple of penalties.
He's saving you points. So I think that's one position you don't have to worry about.
He's the first keeper to save a penalty at the Stadium Light ever in a league game the other week.
Do you think?
Yeah, I can't remember the game actually. Played so many games now. But yeah, he did.
He's a quality. He's So sometimes, I mean, Reid talks in the book about signing Steve Ball and said, I knew I'd signed a really good player, but he said I had no idea how good, and he actually sort of watched him train, and maybe fingers crossed McLaughlin's one of those where Ross has signed what he thinks is a good goalkeeper and he turned out to be better than he thought.
Yeah. Who do you think, to go over your time covering Sunderland, who was actually the best keeper do you think we've had during your time covering them?
Tony Coton would say him.
Yeah.
But Tony Coton was a good goalkeeper. We didn't see the best of him.
Got injured, didn't he?
I think I'd say Sorensen. I think I would say Sorensen, and there's a good contrast between say Sorensen and Perez. And Perez was probably the most spectacular goalkeeper I've seen.
Flamboyant.
These sort of the lion's mane and these sort of like rolled up arms, that sort of stuff. But technically, it was a nightmare.
That kit they had as well really helped to accentuate it at the time, didn't it?
Yeah, but the thing is that sort of Sorensen was. When you talk to goalkeepers, they say that when the saves are almost the least important thing. It's all about your positioning, your awareness. It's all about organising your defence. And the argument would be that Lionel was making saves because he kind of had to, because he kind of messed up and he was redeeming himself. Whereas with Thomas, a lot of it, if you talk the back four, they really appreciate it. Before Thomas got an injury on international duty, a really bad one, which didn't help him. And I think his confidence went a bit from them, but certainly the first 3 or 4 seasons he was absolutely outstanding. And Sunderland have had really good goalkeepers.
Always.
Myra was a good, underrated goalkeeper. He didn't get a chance, but Myra was a good goalkeeper. Mark Poom just got sold Jordan Pickford, which is it still saddens me that that's happened. But one thing Sunderland have had over the years, and you all go back to Monty and Roos and almost at the start of the club, they've had fantastic goalkeepers who the fans have really appreciated, which made last season, all the more heartbreaking because, geez,
Wow.
So hopefully McLaughlin taking us back to where we normally are in terms of the club having good goalkeepers.
It's 4 consecutive clean sheets as well, which is crazy, really, considering I think we'd only kept 1 prior to that run. So he's getting his just deserved now.
Absolutely. I think it's just a testament to the team clicking, isn't it, really?
It's solid. It's a back 4, though. It's not changing anymore. You know, like the 2 centre-backs, anyway, have probably played the last 7 or 8 games together, and that's huge.
I think if they're fit, they're going to play. I know we tinkered with 3 at the back early on a little bit, but I think that's set now with those 2, certainly.
Yeah.
Have we, do you think, perhaps benefited from Glenn Lewin's getting injured? That's not to say that I've thought Glenn Lewin's been playing bad, but we've often been swapping the team around because obviously, he's 34, 35. He's getting on. He can't play Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. He's got to have rests, and when we do rest him, obviously we bring someone else in. So maybe because he's been taken out by default through injury, we've had Baldwin and Flanagan in the middle. Flanagan's took his chance with both hands. He's cemented his place in the team. Have we perhaps benefited from not needing to swap a player because he's got all legs?
I think it happens more often than you think in football. I think when you go back and you look at over the years, and managers who are honest will say, "Oh, well, I stuck him in there as a stopgap, and I couldn't believe it." Even for example, say Dave Watson, 1973, and then he went on to England, obviously FA Cup hero. He originally was a striker. I think it was Billy Elliott under Bob Stokes who said, you might actually be a better defender. And literally, so there's a guy who played quite a bit of his career as a striker, target man striker, suddenly became an absolutely outstanding defender. I think he was the player of the match at Wembley, but outstanding defender. And it can happen. Managers will say, "Oh, we've got no one for the slot for the left back or the right back," and they put somebody in, and it surprises them. So
Richardson was the one back. He ended up at left back. Sorry, because we didn't have a left back. He just got put in there, and he was really good.
Yeah, he was right in the middle of the 15 years when we went without a left back.
Yeah.
So managers sometimes sort of like, usually they're honest. Usually they're honest and say, "Well, I didn't expect him to play there, but but when that happens, they love that. Managers love that. It's a kind of happy accident.
Yeah.
But what a problem it will solve for them."
I still remember Steve Bruce trying Kenwyne Jones at centre back. That did not work.
Yeah,
categorically did not.
Usually they try it in close season, and they'll just experiment. I remember one pre-season game I'd played where Sunderland had lost, and you're trying to I was talking to Reid, and you're trying to kind of like. Managers are always in a bad mood after they've lost, so you always try to be diplomatic. And I said, "Oh, is there anything you've learned from the game, Peter?" And he was like, "Yeah, Jody Craddock's not a left back." He played in a left back. I've cut the swear words out of that sentence, but he tried. Managers, all managers try this little experiment and sort of, and usually they've got a pretty good grasp of where people are going to play and where they can't. But every now and again, people like Alan Johnson moving from right wing to left wing, and that was the making of him. And these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right, let's move on to the goal scorer yesterday. So Aidan McGeady. Gav asks, who is our managing editor of ROKER Report.
Is he?
Yeah, the leader of ROKER Report. But I'm gunning for him.
That wasn't a joke.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That laugh masqueraded a very serious statement there.
Yeah, serious tension. That's not really. I mean, Gav, I wouldn't want his job, to be honest.
No.
A lot of hours for not
far
much
too
reward.
busy.
Yeah. He asked anyway, wouldn't mind hearing thoughts on Jack Ross's thinking outside the box style management. When most people watching could see at half time that McGeady was struggling, Ross stuck with him and it paid off. This is one occasion he seems to make decisions like this every week. So what do you make of, McGeady's turnaround in the second half, but also Jack Ross's game management, I'll call it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think McGeady had a turnaround of sorts. I think he was consistently a bit underwhelming off the ball all game, but it just so happens with McGeady that if you give him half a chance on goal, he can just take it, and he can just score a screamer from nowhere. I think he's just like that. I just don't think he's a very consistent player in general, but because he's got a goal in him, you can always justify having him in the team. So maybe Ross was aware of that. Maybe he sees that in training and thinks, you know what, I'll bide my time with McGeady. If I bring enough now, I forfeit the chance of him scoring a pearler. I'll leave him on, see what he does. If we get to 75, 80 minutes and he's done out, I'll bring him off. But fair play to Ross if that was his thinking, because it paid dividends. He put away a lovely goal to open the game, converted a penalty, stuck it in the same place, won us the game, effectively. So, yeah.
I think McGeady's one of those players where you always want him in the final third of the pitch. You don't want him on the halfway line.
No.
You want him up. You want him lurking around the box and you want to get the ball to him. Grayson told me about when he bought him. He really, in this sort of championship level, he really thought McGeady was going to be his match winner, championship level, and actually he did play well enough under Grayson. But I think he's one of those. He's a frustrating player to watch because when he's rubbish, he's rubbish. It feels, when he's not on song. But what you need to do is you need to give him the ball in dangerous positions. You should be told, don't come back to the halfway line, and then you should get the ball to him all the time. There are some players, and Matt Letizia was one of those players where his teammates were just instructed, just give Letizia the ball all the time, because if he doesn't get it, he loses interest, and McGeady reminds me of that sort of type of player where you need him in an attacking position and just feed him the ball because he can always score your goal.
Maybe just tell him, you're an inside forward, not a winger. Try and make his role as offensively oriented as possible. Make him much like a striker without being a striker, which you can do.
That goal yesterday where he pulled, shooting it was a corner sort of stuff. That was that's just having that inventiveness mentally when you're up front. Not many people can do that. It's a skill, it's a talent. So you don't want to have that squandered by him being near the halfway line, or as you say, out on the wing so much. Get him near the goal area.
Is he a luxury player then?
Yes, I would say so.
Well, all teams are combinations, aren't they? So you've got your workhorses and you've got your show ponies, and it's just getting that balance right. I would say in this league, given the squad Sunderland have got, anyone who can win them a game. And there's no shortage of legs in this side. There's no shortage of young, willing workers and young players. But I think that that's a call for Jack Ross. We're talking about judgment calls. That's a call for Jack Ross come January. And we'll have to look at what happens with Duncan Watmore as well. I mean, Duncan deserves to be a success. He's an exemplary professional, an exemplary human being, and he's a really impressive character and very, very sad in terms of his injuries. We'll have to see how he comes back. Sometimes players didn't used to come back from that sort of injury, in the old days. We'll have to wait and see how he comes back. Hopefully he comes back really, in good shape. If he does, maybe that Ross thinks about cashing in on McGeady, maybe not. But I'd like to see him keep him because I think he'll win you games. Yeah,
I think ultimately I would say McGeady's flair and creativity is something that, as we saw yesterday, it can win you a game. But ultimately, we do have other players, I think, capable of the same sort of fundamental talent for a winger. And all things being equal, come the end of the season, you might be able to look back and think, right, McGeady's contributions could be seen as surplus. like the dynamics he offers to a team can be viewed as something that's nice to have, but we could do without. A fit Watmore, Maguire, Sinclair, they can all chip in and do the job that we want for our spearhead going forward.
I think this is where Jack Ross's man management comes in as well. Sort of, if the very best of McGeady is an absolute match winner, and you want him in your side. But if he's going to have those frustrating 5 or 6 games where he's doing very little, then he's a luxury player and you don't want him. So it's a good question of whether Jack Ross can bring it out of him.
We're talking about, obviously, I mentioned game management, but you look back at the games recently, how many times Ross, I think, has won us the game with tactical decisions. And I don't think we've had a manager at Sunderland for a good while that has been able to think, right, I'm going to take off Madger and bring on Gooch at Shrewsbury. And then that is actually, at the time I was like, why is he doing that? He's taking off our goal scorer. Gooch comes on and then causes havoc and gets with the goals.
Yeah, we've come a long way from Moyes bringing on Billy Jones on the 85th minute when we're 2-0 down.
Yeah,
that's it. It is a frustrating thing, and when you're in the press box, you hear what the fans are thinking, and you're obviously walking the same streets, them drinking the same pubs, and you hear that a lot. When you when people are scratching their head saying, "Why did he do that? And what's he doing?" That sort of stuff. And then that is one of the heartening things about Jack Ross coming here is that you're hearing none of that. And if you think about it, you probably should, because it's new league. It's new country for him, really, and it's in a way a completely new team. You thought he'd be making more mistakes than he is, but he's really impressive.
He's hitting them out of the park every time, isn't he? At the minute, I think he learned a lot, to be fair, from that Burton defeat, where it just didn't click that day. And I think from then we've been a bit more streetwise. I think probably the right way of putting it.
Been a lot less complacent from the start. That was the last game, really, when we conceded an early goal, isn't it?
Yeah, it was just every game was the same,
like
wasn't
3
it?
since then. So
we've got a question here from DC SAFC Golfer. So I don't know if he's a fan of the comics and loves some golf.
Well,
while listening to the ROKER Report podcast, must be
plenty of evidence in the username.
He says, time to sell Katz, Oviedo, McGeady? Is we have enough cover from new players who've settled? ? And then he clarifies, so with the new players settling and now performing, is it likely that Katz and Oviedo will both be sold in the January window? That'll save 50 to 60. I think it's going to be probably more than that a week, but more like 80 grand a week. For me, we have adequate enough quality to let them go for a good price worth discussing. So initially when I got sent this question, I was like, no. But then when he's clarified his point, I sort of understand where he's coming from a little bit. So, I mean, what do we make of... I think Oviedo is the obvious one to get rid of. But Katz as well, if a good offer came in, would it make sense to sell him?
In my, I suppose, hierarchy of players to sell, I would have Oviedo at the top. I think for a fullback on those wages for League One, when we've got Reece James, who's done a perfectly good job, and Denver Hume, who's looked very promising. I think we don't need three. I think we'll probably be able to get by all right without three left backs. So Oviedo can go. I think just for sheer wages, I would imagine Cattermole's on a bit more than McGeady, but I'm not sure. I think they're both.
I think they're just both worth keeping.
Yeah. I think Cattermole's on more wages, but Cattermole is in a more vital position for me. I don't quite trust Max Power with suspensions at the moment. I'm not. That's not to say I think he's going to get any more red cards, but it's just. It doesn't sit with me that he's had 2 red cards in about 5 appearances. That doesn't sit well with me. So I would say sell Oviedo definitely and sell one of the 2 of Cattermole and McGeady, but I think selling all 3 is going to leave us a bit light on the ground. So that's just how I see it.
Graeme, where are you at with this?
I think it all depends what's happening in the background that we don't know about. I mean, I know that the amount of money the club's trying to save is phenomenal, and it's an awful. I mean, literally, it's like writing on both sides of the notepad, sort of, it's counting your paper clips, kind of down to forensic, saving every penny thing. So it depends where they are financially. Of the 3, Oviedo will be the one you'd sell. He's a defender, and as it's been mentioned,
probably the biggest market as well for him.
And I really like Denver Hume. I think Denver Hume's a really promising young player. So you could probably do without Brian if you're pushing at it. I think I wouldn't want to sell Lee Cattermole. I wouldn't want to sell Aidan McGee. I really like Lee Cattermole when he's on song. When he's on song, he should stroll this division. He should stroll the championship, in all honesty. I think with Cattermole, he's had an awful lot of injuries. And with Lee Cattermole, I've watched him for years. Once he gets a run of games, once he gets 4 or 5 or 6 games under his belt and he starts to kind of get his touch and his feel back, he can dictate games very easily. I know sort of he's not the most prettiest player to watch, but he's underrated with his passing as well. I can't believe he's added goals to his game this season. That surprised me. But I just think he can be a heartbeat of your team, and he's quite respected by the players, and he's been there. He brings confidence. All these senior players, remember, and it's a very youthful side. All these senior players, Oviedo, McGeady, Cattermole, they've been there. They've played in the Premiership. They've got a bit of. The young players will look up to them. So if you can hold on to them financially, I would do. What I would say is, if you do get rid of Oviedo, that the money's ploughed back into the January window. I think the January window is crucial. So I would say that as long as Jack Ross gets the money that is either saved or which any transfer fees he gets from any of these players, that's the crucial thing for me. But I'd like to see Katz and possibly McGeady still at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, what is Oviedo going to be on a week?
I think it's 42.
It's 40 something, isn't it? I think it's 42. Yeah, you sell.
Him and Cattermole were on like 60 in the Premier League, so it came down to 42.
Yeah, I mean,
a mere 42.
So together with McGeady as well, you're probably talking about 100 to 110.
Oh yeah. So I think 2 of the 3 have got to go, and 42 million. You sell him, and suddenly you're freeing up that much on the wage bill. You can relocate a tenth of that, and you can sign a good player for this division. I mean, there's talk of that Jaden Stockley from Exeter, who's like a really promising young forward. You could tempt him to Sunderland for what, 5k a week, I'm sure.
I think the word though, 2 of the 3 have got to go. I mean, Stuart Donald said that they don't actually have to get rid of anybody.
No, they don't. But I think it's best to, if you're going to sort of, if you want to improve the squad on where it is. I mean, I don't know where we're going to be come January. I don't know if we're going to be 6 points clear of whoever's in second, or if Portsmouth, Peterborough, Barnsley are going to have a resurgence and we're going to drop our form. We might be in a position where we're thinking, right, we've there are some spots where we're not necessarily weak, but we need to improve to define ourselves from the teams in and around us. So if we sell someone like Oviedo, who we don't necessarily need, alongside Catamol or McGeady, one of the two, then you can reinvest 10% of the wages, make a significant net gain on selling them, and have players, that Ross deems fit to improve the squad on where it is.
I think you made a good point about the young striker as well. You might be looking for. What's crucial to me is that at the end of January, the team is strong. The squad is stronger than it was at the beginning of January. So if you have to sacrifice Oviedo with his qualities, because you generate the money to bring in that young striker or that centre half or that whoever it is that Jack Ross is looking for, maybe a target man striker is probably something we're lacking at the moment. As long as the money is used to strengthen the squad, as long as you can look back in January and say, oh, okay, we lost Oviedo, lost McGeady, or maybe even lost all three, but look who we've got now and we're better for it. Yeah, that's the key thing.
Sadly, that's be a plan in place if you do sell them. You don't sell them for the sake of just freeing up wages, because then we are, if we don't get someone over the line because the plan wasn't in place in good time, you are going to, as you say, end the January window weaker, which is absolutely not what you want.
Yeah, there's no joy in going, oh, we're a great window, we've saved £3 or £4 million, or McGeady's gone, or our matchwinner's gone, Catamol's gone, we can dictate a game, sort of, we've lost all those, but hey, the money's better.
Yeah, like what have you've saved it great, what have you saved it for?
Yeah.
What does it achieve?
But also, you've got to think, they're going to be aiming for the championship, obviously. Do you want to get rid of players like Catamol, McGeady when you're about to go into the championship? I mean, they would be players, again, if you were in the championship, you'd be like, yeah, we'll target them. So, for 6 months to pay them the money they're on, Stuart Donald said it himself, it doesn't look that bad when they're in the championship and you're gunning towards the Premier League. You can justify paying Catamol 42 grand. Well, maybe you can't justify it, but at least it's easier to digest. On that sort
and to
of
be fair to the owners, they've done a fantastic job in shifting the number of players they've shifted and the wage and dropped the wage bill. I mean, if the Gilabodji thing works out well, which fingers crossed it will, and I believe it will, but if the Gilabodji thing works out well and Dong's gone, all these players, they've already saved a colossal amount of money.
It is. You think about where they were when they came in, and the players they had, and the way the club was to where they are now. I mean, it's chalk and cheese in it. In 6 months to do what they've done and to be competitive at the top of a division.
Well, what's incredible is, I mean, that was where I learned quite a bit from talking to Grayson, and he's quite honest about a lot of the stuff. And you just think, what a mess. What an absolute shambles. And it was a shambles before Grayson got there. For the Moyes. I mean, if you ask who's the most disappointing manager, I don't know, Martin O'Neill possibly, because of what everyone thought he was going to be, the new Clough. That was a dream. So that was a shame. But Moyes, I honestly thought when David Moyes came in, someone had a fantastic manager, he'd sort them out. But what was he thinking about? Just take those two there, Gilabodji, 8 million for Gilabodji, and was 14 million for Dong.
Did he a record signing in Dong?
Record signing, yeah. When you point your record signing, I don't mind if you're pointing Darren Bent or Asamoah Gyan or some of these players, but Didier and Dong, I mean, that's the high watermark of ineptitude in terms of payment. Yeah. So, and then it wasn't just the fact that they overpaid for these players. It was they weren't very good either. And Grayson says in the book, I'm watching these players in training and thinking, because I said to him, look, I know they didn't play well in the games, but was it a case of they were world beaters in training like you can sometimes get? And he said, no, we weren't very good in training either. So you just think, how much money has been wasted. And I think if there's one thing which all the years I covered Sunderland, the saddest thing for me is that we had good managers who didn't have the money, and then we had some pretty ropey managers who got fortunes. And if you would have just married that, what would Jack Ross feel like now if he had an even half decent budget? You know what I mean? I'm not sort of decrying the budget he's got. I'm just saying, though, the budget that other managers.
If you had the budget that David Moyes had, for example, I mean, obviously in League One that would be incredibly ludicrous. I mean, you could give me that money and I'd win your League One here with 30 million, but
you don't need to spend a fortune in this division, not in League One. I mean, sort of, we were talking Cats a while back, and I remember before Graham Kavanagh came to Sunderland, he was very much of a Catamol style player playing for Stoke City in that division in League One some years ago, and he was bossing every game because he was at a level above. And when Keane came in and he bought those 6 players he just bought players who should have been in a higher division, and they weren't, okay, Dwight York was a household name, but he's at the end of his career. But he didn't have to spend that much money to get out of a division. And I think the same with Jack Ross. And I think I've been really impressed by how he's gone about it. You know what I mean? Sort of. But if they can get that budget up, that's to me the one thing we're still waiting for from Stuart and Charlie Medford is if they can get that kind of, can they raise a budget to help Jack Ross get over the line this season and maybe next.
Madja was quiet yesterday. Obviously, I think it was his first start since his injury. But what do you make of his season so far with 9 goals? You know, I mean, it's a lot for a 19-year-old. I don't know if any teenagers have scored at that rate yet for Sunderland in their history. I mean, you probably know more than me, Graeme. But
Bridges was...
he was never playing regularly, though, was he? Because he was always kept out by
Phillips.
Yeah.
But when he played, there was a buzz of excitement every time. I mean, I don't think Madja's got that. I think maybe he lacks a bit of pace, Madja. But you'll have to judge him across the course of a season. I mean, you can go back through the history books, and this is not to decry Madja, but you'll have people who've come in and have had a purple patch, have scored a few goals, and then they kind of there's loads of them who at the time they'll have that 10 dozen games where they're on fire and then they kind of drift away. I mean, Graben can be a bit like that. You know, there's no surprise that Bournemouth were trying to flog Graben last season because he'd never had a patch like that in his career. When you actually look at Graben, he tends to score his goals in bursts, but that spell at Sunderland, he had a fantastic time, and Bournemouth obviously trying to sell him straight away because they thought, well, this is not going to last, you know. So I think you've got to do it over a longer period of time. But for the lad to be scoring a number of goals he's scored so far, you've got to give him full credit. And rather than kind of saying, can he do this, we've just got to kind of hope, fingers crossed, back him to do it, because teenagers scoring those goals, great.
Yeah.
And the speculation now about, which is always going to be, are the clubs going to come in for him? Or
his contract's up at the end of the year, which is a worry.
But even then, same with Ballymumba now, I'll say that, and he's just signed, I think he signed a contract, but that will not stop people coming in for them. But no, I think that's one of the highlights of the season. Madja's been able to get all those goals, incredible.
Honeyman played deeper yesterday. He's played that role a couple of times this season. Second half against Charlton springs to mind, where he dropped into central midfield. But what do you make of his performances in recent weeks after he was injured, then dropped for a few games? He seems to have looked more like the player we thought he was going to be at this level.
I think he's come back into it, and he's probably played his best football this season for coming back from his injury. I think the past couple of games he's been, his usual, sounds almost like a cliche, his usual industrious self, the kind of self that scores him a 6 out of 10, that kind. But no, I think he's hit above the usual sort of like average mark he would get. He sort of hits above that running joke.
You give him a 7.
He got a 7, yeah, which suggests that he is indeed above average. So it is what it is. But yeah, no,
match marks, players hate match marks.
Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, one thing they hate is match marks.
Right.
Did you enjoy doing player ratings?
I didn't enjoy it.
Do you ever get any stick?
Oh yeah, all the time. All the time. I tell you, players hate match marks. They really do, and sort of like they can hold it against you. 6 months later, you give me a 5, and then sort of stuff.
Yeah, remind me to never speak to a player using my real name.
Well, I remember, and there's a good story about Frank Johnson, who's a Northern Echo journalist. I don't know if you saw him. He died recently, just died a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I went to his funeral, and we had a lot of reminiscence about Frankisms, because he's one of those real characters. 78-year-old when he died, and he used to love giving match marks out, because he was, and I'll let you see, there's a wide, and you'll know yourself from giving match marks out, there's a wide disparity between those people who take their match marks very seriously, those journalists, and for them it's kind of so important, and some play a bit fast and loose. For a lot of the nationals, they have to give the match marks have to be given over on the hour. So sometimes an hour into a game you have to give your match marks. So sometimes when you pick them up and think, hey, how's he got that? Often it's because the reporter has given it after the hour and hasn't seen the player sent off or whatever it is. But I think Frank had an argument once with Eric Gates, I think it was, and Eric. This is the story that's told, because Eric was playing those days, and obviously he came from that neck of the woods, so he'd get the Northern Echo, which is Frank's, and he pulled Frank because he was always getting stinking match marks. It might have been the relegation season when they went down to the 3rd division, and he pulled Frank and said to the trainer, "Frank, how come I'm always getting crap match marks?" And Frank said, "I'll let you into a secret." He says, "When every player takes that field, they start on 10, and I'll mark them down as the game goes on." He said, "You you start on nothing. And he walked away. So I mean, sort of like the match marks is always contentious, and every player will quibble about it. But it's I think the match marks aren't the important thing. It's just But I do know that ego-wise players. Gary Rowell said if you got a bad match mark, he said I never used to go out at the weekend. He said like if I got a 5 or a 4, it wasn't worth going out because I get stick from people who hadn't beat them. I hadn't beaten the game saying heard you were crap, Gary. Like no, I did it all right. And then another thing which is always difficult as well is Bobby Kerr. Bobby Kerr said, and this is his point about the match marks. He would sometimes be given a man marking job, and Bob Stoker would say, "You've got to. This guy's too good for us. You've got to mark him out of the game. Just stick with him. Don't move." That was the game plan. And Bobby would do that and then win the game and he'd get hugs off Bob Stoker. You've won us the game. You did that job. You never got a kick. You've been brilliant. And then he'd pick up the Echo on Monday or whatever it was and it'd be like, Bobby Kerr 4, quiet game. So you get that all the time from players.
See, that's why George Winman doesn't come out. It's your match ratings.
Yeah, it's me. That's why he's not left the house since he was appointed captain. No,
he's going to be walking up and down the Wearmouth Bridge tomorrow. He's like, I got a 7.
He'll be out in Annabelle's or whatever the modern equivalent is.
Yeah, you probably have like a bell with like a sign. I got a 7.
All right, yeah. Ding ding.
Yeah.
Ding.
I think what I would say is that with these players, Honeyman, Gooch, Madge, all these players, they're really, really young. Really young, and so we shouldn't. I know everyone's got to give them match marks, but they should get credit for what they're doing. I know it's League One, but they should get credit for performing the way they are, and they're only young, so they will get better. I think Sunderland will be a stronger team as the season goes on because these players will get better because they're playing competitive football regularly, sort of stuff. So we shouldn't forget how well the young players have done for Sunderland.
Yeah. I'm quite surprised at how much they actually care about player ratings. I mean, it's just me, but I think if I was a professional footballer and I picked up a paper or just like read a blog and someone gave us a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10, I think, right, yeah, well, I mean, I'm a professional footballer. From a professional standpoint, I know the game better than you do. Yeah. I play it as my trade. I mean, that's not to say that only professionals can have opinions on professionals that are valid. Yeah. But I just think as a footballer, I'd be fairly happy to just dismiss what a punter says.
I think though, back in the day when Graham's covering Sunderland in 1999 or 1989, there isn't Twitter, there isn't thingy. The thing that they've got to cover the game is literally the Echo. And if you didn't go to that match, you've got to read the Echo.
Very, very true.
That is the talking point, isn't it?
Yeah, very true. And it was a different era back then. I remember once I went on holiday during the season, unforgivable. But I was at Newcastle Airport and I picked up as the Chronicle. And the match report was written there by a lad called Tony Hodgson. And it came home to me, actually, because I'd never ask anyone's opinion. Never had to ask anyone's opinion about a match because I was always there and I had my own opinions. Mm-hmm. But if you don't go to the match and you pick up a paper and the paper is the only source you've got to think, well, that's what happened in the match. Yeah. Sort of like, and you believe every word and the match marks are part of that.
You've got nothing else to go on. Like you have to accept that as...
Yeah, but you're right, it's a different world now. And I would hope the players have a bit of a thicker skin because, the Twitter sphere and Facebook and the rest of it, it's pretty, I mean, it can be a sewer, let's be honest. It can be pretty ugly, you know what I mean?
It can, and I think a lot of them, maybe especially the younger ones, definitely do care. I mean, I remember last season, Tyus Brown inboxed Lawson to say like, oh no, you've marked us down for that, but that was actually Jay Clark-Salter who did that, not me.
Yeah, he did. It was it wasn't my mistake for the second goal. It
wasn't even Lawson's report either. It was mine.
Yeah,
it happens more often than you think. I think sort of confusion.
The thing is, you'll know that as well because I mean, I was telling you before we started that I Twitter trolled you when I was younger and showed you.
Everyone has.
Yeah,
everyone has.
Still bears the scars to these days, Connor. He's actually only on here now to exact his revenge.
I know when Gav said he's like Graeme Anderson's coming on, I was like, really? Oh, you
I'm really going to remember it. I'm not really going to remember it, but I mean, I do. It's. Everyone gets stick, and but I do feel sort of sometimes for the players because we've all seen, you'll have had stick and you'll have had stick,
I've had many.
It kind of goes with the territory, but sometimes it can be, it can be a bit OTT and like you say, you forget the players. You forget. I mean, Stephen Elliott's a friend of mine, the striker, former striker. And he was in book 2, and I flew over to Dublin and interviewed him for book 2. He was great. But what you forget is when he was scoring those goals for Sunderland, he was 21 year old. He was kind of a kid, essentially. And I think that is that assumption when you're watching men on the pitch, it's a man's game and all that sort of stuff, you forget that sort of someone can just like literally be a year or two out of school, 17, 18, 19.
Or doing their GCSEs as Ballymumba was last year.
I know, it's crazy that, like,
captain in the club.
I know, I mean, sort of like
that was unreal, to be fair. Like
night matches, he had to get permission to stay up from his mum.
No, it's scary.
Really? Wow.
So we'll talk a little bit about Honeyman there, but what about his midfield partner, McGeoch? And, I mean, I think he's getting better every week, but Power's going to be coming back, Cattermole's going to be pretty much back soon, so we're going to have an interesting situation where there's them three, and, McGeoch's done nothing wrong, Cattermole's not really doing anything wrong.
No.
Power has actually done stuff wrong, even though he's probably the best of the three.
Yeah, his actual gameplay, apart from getting sent off, has been great. But
yeah, so it's an interesting decision. I mean, how would you, if I was going to give you your Jack Ross right now, how do you approach that situation?
Well, ignoring the fact that I'm obviously a very big Honeyman stan, let's just table that for now.
Gonna be in there.
Sorry?
Honeyman going to get in the start.
Well, Honeyman and McGeoch have been playing well together. Well, Honeyman and McGeoch played well together on Saturday. And I think what particularly impressed me was the fact that Honeyman seemed to be able to play his same sort of like pressing, high pressing, intercepting, sort of industrious game. He would chase around the tackles. He would get forward with the team, spearhead the attacks just as he did while he was playing a more offensive role naturally. But he still seemed to do that yesterday while also playing his deeper role. So I think that's really just a testament to his energy. And I think, as we said, it's a testament to the fact that, he can play a more quiet role. He can make substantive contributions that don't necessarily go unnoticed, because what he doesn't involve creating the goals or scoring them or making saves or, making blocks on the line. But what he is doing in the middle of the park, is steering the ship. It's carrying things over, and he's done all of that. He's essentially done his same role, but from a deeper position where he can also adapt another role alongside McGeoch. So for me, I'd keep him in alongside Dylan and just see how they get on next week. Obviously, you've got options if need be. If it's not quite working, you can push him up, you can take him off.
It's Port Vale next week though, so will he drop the two of them to give?
No, I'd keep them together just to see if they could do the same thing again. I'd like to see if Honeyman maybe could sort of keep that energy on a consistent basis, maybe. But obviously, as I say again, if it doesn't look like it's working, then that's a good game to sort of trial it. And if it's not quite coming off, then you can stick Cattermole back there. You can push him up. You can take him off, and you can put Power on. The options are fairly limitless, really, with all these players coming back. So yeah, we'll see how we get on.
Graeme, what do you think? Do you think the midfield pair isn't set, or do you think Max Power and Lee Cattermole jump back in when they're fit?
I think what you're alluding to, there's the curse of the water carrier, where sort of, I remember Paul Thirlwell and we used to get that same sort of stick local lad who came through and did all the hard work, but was pretty much invisible sometimes to the players. One would say, well, what did you do, sort of stuff, but then the manager would say, well, when the left back raced forward, he covered for the left back. So when they counter attacked, he was there. And those players are kind of really valued by the teammates. They're never spectacular. And sometimes you'll have players saying, "I wonder why he's in the team." There's been a few players I can think of where it's, "I wonder why he's in the team." But the managers know that they keep the discipline, they keep the shape, they do the right things. The unsung heroes of the team. I would think that he might leave those two in initially, but he'll be itching to get Cattermole back in. He'll probably be itching to get Power in. We'll have to see how these players have been in training. I imagine that Power, having got himself out of the side through his own stuff, will be itching to kind of prove himself. So he might be playing really well in training. These are the things we don't see. So he might be playing really well in training, and Ross might be. It would be an interesting choice for Ross, because he'll have to think, well, Cattermole, Power's arguably my best central pair, and if they're both fit, do I throw them back in? But what does that do to the motivation of the two players who've done nothing wrong so far? So he'll probably look at it and think, I have to choose whether I'm loyal to the players who've done well and haven't let me down, or whether I play what I think is my best 11, sort of from the start, and the other players just have to suck it up. I think he'd be tempted to leave those two in, but have Cattermole and Power on the bench, and the moment he thinks the intensity's dropping or isn't happening, they'll be on.
Ballymumba 17 just signed a new deal. I mean, where do we think he's going to be, in a few years' time? Do you think he seems to have his feet well grounded? He seems to, he's a local lad as well. I think he lives in South Shields. But do you think he will get his head turned by Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool? Or do you think he'll be...
I really hope not. Not because well, not mainly because we'd be losing what could potentially be a very good player in the future, but because these clubs, they take young talent as commodities and they ruin them. Look at Jack Rodwell, look at Scott Sinclair, you could name God knows how many. A lot of these clubs will just sort of pick up young players. Yeah, they'll pick up great players, put them on ridiculous money. Give them very little life skills outside of football. They'll have all the sort of neon lights coming at them at once, and 25% of them actually make it. So from an ethical standpoint, I would say no, I wouldn't want them to go. What I would like to see Mumba do in the next 2 or 3 years is get a nice string of loan spells together, much like Pickford did when he was coming through the ranks. Start say in the National League, work your way up a division each season if you are improving at that level, until eventually he's turning up for the first team if he's good enough. That's what I would want to see. I'd want to see him have stability. I'd want to see him progress at a very natural rate. I wouldn't want to see a dramatic jump in his career trajectory. I wouldn't want to see him jump into a top 4 Premier League club that will promise him so much, promise him the stars, and when in reality he might fall short of the ceiling. I don't really know how he's going to go. I've not seen enough of him to really gauge his talent, but yeah, I want him to turn out like Pickford, to summarise, and not like Rodwell. And obviously one path will be to have a nice bunch of loans with us. The other would be to get his head turned by a big team.
It's interesting that you mentioned loans, though, when he's played first team football for Sunderland, and he always looks good at this level. So I mean,
he does, but he's only. Would you
want to throw him down into the conference? He's
only played a few times. I think in his sort of inaugural games, you're probably going to see him, give his all. And when you see a 17-year-old lad giving his all and holding his own, you naturally will think, oh yeah, he's doing pretty well. But I think at this stage, in his career, in his life, if he's playing every week or if he's playing more or less every week, then we're probably going to start to think, right, maybe he's at his depth a bit here. Like I say, that's just me. That's just my conjecture. I don't know for certain if that's going to be the case, but I just think that maybe we'll look at him if he's playing regularly and think, I don't know, he could probably do with a bit more experience at a lower level, maybe where the stakes aren't as high, where he isn't in front of 30,000 every week. He could probably benefit from a spell with. I don't know, Bromley Town. I don't know. I just looked at you and I thought of the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, the logical one.
Gateshead's the logical one. Yeah, I don't know. I was looking at you and I was thinking Club, Low, Bromley. Yeah. Bromley. There we go. That's a club.
Good team.
Yeah. I think. I mean, this is super close to my heart because I love to see homegrown players coming through, and my experience is that if they are homegrown, they have that passion that you can't buy. I mean, sort of. No. I remember that I was getting words back last season that Jordan Pickford would rather still be at Sunderland. He's a Sunderland fan, Sunderland daft. He plays for Everton. He's a professional.
Yeah, he's welcome back.
He'd rather, and Jordan Henderson, massive Sunderland fan, and you go back to say Martin Smith and Michael Bridges and these sort of young players coming through, and Sunderland never really made the best of them. I personally was against selling Jordan Henderson for 20 million to Liverpool. And I wrote a piece sort of saying Sunderland will never be the big club we want to be unless we can hold on to these homegrown players who live and breathe Sunderland and build a team around them. And Steve Bruce would disagree with me. Someone Steve Bruce, and he almost fell in the swimming pool when Kenny Dalglish offered 20 million for Jordan Henderson. And at the time, it was politic to sell Jordan. And it's interesting, I was always a big fan of Jordan's and what he does on the pitch, and a lot of fans weren't. But is he worth 20 million now? Jordan Henderson is worth a hell of a lot more than that, I mean, Pickford's gone for 20, 30 million. He could go for 40, 50 in a few years' time, you know what I mean? So I like that.
For probably 60, 70
yes,
right now.
Yes, so I like
absolutely.
And by the way, he's got no sell-on clause in his contract. So, which is just,
great,
again,
wonderful.
Heartbreaking, Imagine the windfall that could have generated. But I like to hold on to the homegrown players as much as you possibly can do. I mean, it broke my heart in the watching England play with Pickford in goal and Henderson, and you're thinking those two should have Jordan Pickford, Sunderland, Jordan Henderson, Sunderland,
Yeah, there's a parallel world where they do.
Yeah, I know. And so the homegrown players, I like to hold them as long as you can do. And I think that there may be sort of some of the quality of performance you're getting from some of the players, young players in League One this season, probably because they are playing for Sunderland and they want to play for Sunderland, and their family are watching them and their friends are watching them. It's a big thing. I think the Ballymumba one, that'll be an interesting one for the owners. I think that'll be an interesting test for the owners. I mean, they're riding the crest of wave at the moment, but it'll be a big test of their resolve. What happens if they've done really well, but they are businessmen as well, and they wouldn't say they're not. They're in this for a reason. But I like the fact that they're upfront about that. I respect them more for the fact that they say that Oxford's their club, and they don't try to pretend. Sort of, I'm red and white now. I mean, Martin Bain was, he came in and he was like, I'm doing his red and white sort of stuff. I think, yeah, well, if you join him, switch a bit, it'll be blue, and if you join, that's that sort of stuff. I mean, they've been honest and said, we're in this kind of to business sort of thing. Now, if say Man City, and you're right, so they come in and they'll spend a few million on these prospects, they hoover them up. It's often not for the good of those players. They'll have to be a world beater to try and get into those teams. And I've seen generations of Sunderland players who are in the reserves, and they almost become a professional reserve, and they can still be there 23, 24, some of them in the old days, and it's a waste of their careers. Ballymumba would be best served staying at Sunderland. There's no shadow of a doubt about that. And he probably believes that himself. But what happens if that offer comes in for 2.5 million or 3 million from a Manchester City or a Chelsea? What do you do if the owners? Do you think, well, it'll be a test for them really? So I'll be watching, those sort of developments. Yeah,
and even actually maybe 2 points. First of all, Steve Bruce falling in a swimming pool, really funny image. Secondly, I think even if Mumba himself, or maybe if he's been advised to believe, if he doesn't already, that a move to a big club now wouldn't be beneficial in the long run. As a 17-year-old, imagine if you're 17 now, you're playing pretty well for Sunderland. You've not featured that much, so people have had very little to go on. But what the fact to go on is very promising. So it just looks like you're doing, you can do no wrong as it stands, and suddenly, in come Chelsea Football Club want to sign you. The same Chelsea that are in the top. Yeah. Where are they now in the league, Chelsea?
I don't know what the score is right now. They're the top 4 at the minute.
Let's say third. Well, that's it. Well, and then suddenly Chelsea, third in the Premier League, want to sign me. Chelsea want to sign me, a 17-year-old lad. Are you going to want to say no to that? What if it never happens again?
I know, but you don't know the circumstance. Because talk about Jordan Pickford. Jordan Pickford. If it was me, I would never want to do anything but play for Sunderland. So it doesn't matter if you throw Barcelona or Real Madrid at me. I'd be like, well, I want to captain Sunderland in an FA Cup final. That would be the only thing I was interested in. You don't know. Ballymumba could be totally and utterly Sunderland through and through.
Equally, he might not be that bothered.
It's great. It's great that he's being linked and talked about in these sort of terms, but it might be a bit premature. I think sort of stuff. I think there might be an aspect of that, but I think also if you do break into a first team when you're 16 or 17 or even 18, people take notice because it's so easy to be dubbed the wonder kid or whatever it is, And there's plenty of kids who've been phenomenal at 16, 17, 18 who never sort of fulfill their potential, and you get your late developers as well. So I think it's good that he's been talked about. I think it's far too premature. I expect him to still be at Sunderland in the January transfer window when it ends, unless he gets the crazy offer. But again, I don't think that'll come down to Ballymumba. You look at, say, last season where Coney wanted to be away and a lot of these players wanted to be away. I don't think Mumba will want to be away. It'll come down to whether a daft offer comes in and whether the owners, how they see it.
Right, we're going to move on. One final thing on current Sunderland. SAFC Dolphins. Maybe he's a Miami Dolphins fan, possibly. He says, as the juggernaut is now running full steam ahead, who do we keep or sell in the transfer window? We're kind of already talking that, but the juggernaut running full steam ahead was really the thing I wanted to talk about. And is that the case now? I think Mick McCarthy last year talked about the oil tanker at Sunderland, it's going the wrong way and there's nothing that's going to turn it. Has it now been turned? Are we now heading
absolutely
full steam ahead?
You have to look at the run. You don't. We had like I said that little sort of bad patch where we drew a few games, then lost to Burton, but we've really not looked back since then. You went on you've beat Rochdale 4-1. You've had 2 draws since then, and then a run of 6 games in a row that we've won in all competitions.
We've had a lot of impressive victories.
A lot of impressive victories.
Wins.
Yeah,
I think we've got
back
plus
to
19 goal difference.
to back clean sheets. If this isn't a team full of individual brilliance clicking together to make one cohesive unit and now ready to beat every team in this league, as it stands, then this has got to be it. This is if ever there was a sign that we are now a team that could win this league, it's now. This has got to be the juggernaut, the Sunderland juggernaut, at full steam ahead.
I think, well, I know that it's the best run in 10 years, best run results and wins since Keane got them promoted.
Not that it's got an awful lot to compete with.
No, and that's what I mean. What we said at the beginning about enjoying the good times. Because these are good times. It's great. I mean, I've had so many years where everyone you meet's down or glum. What's going on with that club, Graeme? All that sort of stuff. Like, it's just nice. It's nice to see people smiling and happy again. So it's a good thing. I think Sunderland will have too much for most teams in this division, but I think that's where that January window is going to be really important, because someone like McGeady, frustrating as he is, can win you games, and he's a player that so many other teams in this division don't have. McLaughlin's been fantastic. Again, player that even Sunderland didn't have last season, sort of stuff. In terms of quality and goal, it's just, I mean, Jack Ross is holding a good hand of cards, and I think full credit to him and the owners for getting that hand. But he'll think, right, well, I could do a couple more aces in the January transfer window. Maybe he's looking for a target man or something, or maybe he's looking for, there'll be areas where he'll be looking to strengthen. So I think that's the key. If it's a juggernaut, if you want to continue that analogy, if you want to maintain its momentum, you have to have a good January transfer window.
Right. Graeme, we're now going to do some sort of stuff about your time covering Sunderland.
I thought you were going to say Morris dancing there.
No.
I don't know why I thought
that. Which managers did you enjoy working with the most?
I covered quite a lot, but probably Reid.
How many managers did you have?
Well, it's like a domino, wasn't it? Towards the end, they were just falling one after the other, In fact, Peter Reid tells a story in the book where, because it had quite a few managers before he joined in rapid succession, Butcher and Crosby and these sort of people, and Buxton, and he met a season ticket holder and said something like, so you're the new manager, yeah? And then Reid said, yeah, I'm a new manager. This was his first couple of games in charge, and the bloke said, they've written your name in chalk on the board. I thought it was a good line. He goes, managers could come and go very quickly. But amongst the succession of them, Reid was there the longest, 7 years, so I had a long time to build a relationship with him. He could be quite terrifying, really, if you were a journalist. But I developed a great relationship with him by the end, and he's coming along to the book launch, which is a nice touch. He doesn't have to do that, so I appreciate him doing that. And those were the best times I had in terms of the club. I mean, sort of the 90-point season, 105-point season, and the 2 7th place finishes. They were second or third at Christmas both times, remember, as well. People forget that. Just phenomenal.
Man United, I think, in January 2001, it was first 3 second.
Well, I remember when in a 105-point season, for example, it was like watching Manchester. It's the one time I've had a feeling of how it must be to be a Manchester United supporter when Alex Ferguson, because you would turn up to a game, you already knew they were going to win just by how many and who would score, sort of stuff, So that was enjoyable times. I enjoyed working really. Probably the manager who I had the best relationship with in many respects was Steve Bruce. Reid could be prickly by his own admission, but Bruce, he was brilliant for me. And I'm only speaking here as a journalist. Absolutely brilliant, and some of the managers weren't. Some of the managers didn't. Every manager is different, and so every time a new manager starts, you have to build that relationship up. Some don't want a relationship. Roy Keane didn't want to know any journalist's name. Literally didn't want. So he made a point of. He didn't want to know anybody. He wanted to be that detached that he would not say, hi Gav, hi Conor. He would say none of that. He would just literally, he wanted to be completely separate. And yet, Keane was brilliant for us, because he couldn't open his mouth without giving you a headline, whereas Mick McCarthy was the exact opposite of that, So I've had a good relationship with quite a few of them, and there's none really that I had too many issues with. Mick McCarthy, from a journalist's point of view, he hated giving you stories, and go out of his way. Sometimes it felt to avoid giving you them, but you don't necessarily need a great relationship to be able to get good copy. I mean, take, for example, two of the people who didn't want a relationship. Roy Keane was one, and Paolo Di Canio was another one. But again, Paolo couldn't open his mouth without sort of something crazy coming out, and as a journalist, that was always good fun. So I think Sunderland have been lucky in the sense that they've had some really big personalities and big names, and that's one area where they've been kind of quite well served.
How was Paolo Di Canio?
How odd.
how was he just in general? I mean, when you
those
hear
could
the news,
be the same question, really, couldn't they?
yeah, I suppose. But when Sunderland go, we are announcing Paolo Di Canio. I mean, what is your reaction as somebody who has to work with him, deal with the PR disaster of him being a fascist and everything else that came with it? And I think it was David Miliband resigned. There was so much in that story. I mean, how was that for you?
I mean, that was a crazy period. That was crazy, and there was a danger there that it was kind of like really spiraling. You know what I mean? So when it's like when there's people sense blood in the water, and he was getting baited, and it was sort of the fascist thing didn't really kind of come out early doors. It kind of came out. I mean, we know he'd said it, but it was only sort of after he'd been appointed. I think that was a bit like the Keane appointment. I think it was a bit kill or cure at the time. It was an element of that. Right, club needs a radical shake-up. We're going to get someone who's going to completely change it. Though the half a dozen times I can look back over the years where it was manic. One was Keane's appointment, and one was Di Canio, the circus for a while. But press-wise, he was okay. Paolo loved to talk about himself. If you're a manager,
Paolo Di Canio used to actually go Paolo Di Canio, no, me Paolo.
He used to talk in third person.
I hate anyone who talks in the third person. It's always a horrible thing to say. And
Alex agrees with you.
Yes, it always kind of seems kind of. But he was good copy, and we never had a problem with him press-wise. But the players did. They just didn't take that regime at all.
We still beat the Marks 3-0, so can't complain too much.
No, and that was the press box at St James's Park, as you probably know, is pretty much behind the manager's dugout. So I had a perfect view of the madness.
I suppose
maybe that moment.
Yeah, quite an apt turn of phrase for an Italian, but I bet he was quite de facto. Then maybe that just didn't wash as a maybe authority figure for the players. I don't know.
Well, it's ketchup.
Ketchup's just like sugar and syrup, isn't it?
I
can't blame them for that.
They've all got their quirks, but sort of like, but again, what we were saying about the whole team thing, Roy Keane was a world class player, and Paolo Di Canio will tell you he was a world class player, but they don't necessarily make the best managers. Because one of the things that often has made them world class is how extreme their approach is, and that extremeness that Keane had eventually saw him moved out of Manchester United, and sometimes that extremeness, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think if you are an extreme figure, it's very hard to make it work long term. You can come in and have a shock and change things around, but then after a while, people think, I'm not having this. There was an element of that with Powell towards the end.
We've got Bob Murray coming on the podcast this week on Thursday. I think it'll be released Friday. But what should we expect from Bob Murray?
Whispering. He whispers a lot. And turn your mics up if I were you. I don't know. I mean, I think Bob's into what happens is for managers, for players, for chairmen is. They live through their era where they're relevant to that particular club, either as a player or a manager, as a chairman, and then they move on, and then their kind of reputations, after a while, become more important than actually what they did. And you'll often hear players saying, "Oh, I'm a better player now than I ever was when I was an actual player." That's because there's been a review in people's minds of how good a player he was or how bad a player he was. I think I defended Reid right at the end, and I thought it was premature sacking him when they did. They were sacking. They weren't even in the relegation zone; they were fourth bottom. It was more of a PR thing than anything else. He'd become unpopular. He was getting hammered every night on the radio show.
Which radio show was that?
This Three Legends show.
Right, because I remember that. You told me.
Yeah, hammered every night, all the time, sort of stuff. I always felt that was a little bit unfair, and the mood was changing. He'd also made, because he was a very strong manager, he made a lot of energy. He says in the book, about I made a lot of unpopular decisions, but I always made a decision I thought was right for the club. But when you make unpopular decisions, you can become unpopular with some powerful people. So I think I always thought it was a mistake to have got rid of Reedy when they did.
I don't think they would have. They might have went down, but they wouldn't have went down as embarrassingly.
No, but yeah, I think that was probably his argument. But I mean, it's just catastrophic after it. They got the wrong manager in as well. That's a long story. But the reason why I mentioned this was, I said, when he was leaving, I said, there'll come a time when people will look back on this as a bit of a golden era. They didn't feel at the time that everyone thought, get rid of him, everything's going to be great after get rid of him. That's what these critics said. And they've never reached those sort of heights since. So what happens is reputations change over the course of time. Now, Bob Murray, and some people who hated Bob Murray at the time will hate him to their dying day. He was a hate figure. And he would probably quite happily accept that for, in the 90s, early 90s, pretty much before Reid arrived. He was a bit of a hate figure. His car windows were put in Roker Park. I remember leaving Roker Park and there'd be a mob outside chanting his name and abuse at him. But again, he's one of those figures where you always felt that over the course of time, people would look back and say, after that bitterness and anger had gone, there'd be a rebalancing of history. And I think that's happening now. I know sort of Stuart Donald and Charlie Medvin, they talk to him quite a bit. He's got a bit of an influence with the foundation still. He's done amazing work with the foundation, which he deserves huge credit. Sunderland led the way in terms of that community involvement, and that was his drive. But he built the stadium. It was his vision that got the stadium built. He got a huge stick for not building the stadium at the time. It was one of the last stadiums to be built. So that criticism can be hurled at him. But they'd learned from every other stadium's mistake. So the Stadium of Light, the way it was designed, was so clever and so smart. And of course, he delivered the Academy of Light as well. That's his legacy. So I think when you look back and think, well, he was probably one of the most criticised chairmen in history. And there will be some people who'll never like him. But at the end of the day, the stadium's there, the academy's there, and the foundation's there. And you could argue none of those would be there if it wasn't for Bob.
How did you feel when Roy Keane was announced as our new manager?
Well, I
know it was rumoured in the summer, wasn't it? And then it went away and then came.
Well, there were loads of rumours. I mean, sort
Allardyce
of
as well,
Martin O'Neill, Allardyce. I mean, Allardyce was past the post. He had his contract written up. He was going to sign in the 11th hour. And when I say 11th hour, I mean 11th hour. He decided he was not going to do it. I think a lot of people lost a lot of money on bets that they thought were cast iron certainties. Yeah. They were probably rubbing their hands because they knew he was about to sign his contract, and he decided not to at the 11th hour, and he didn't sign. When Roy signed, I was a bit of I wasn't convinced. I wasn't unconvinced, but my thought at the time was, because if you remember, Quinny was promising a world-class manager and bringing a world-class manager in, and I was scratching my head when Keane was announced, because I was thinking, I mean, I know probably the thought should be that I should be cartwheeling around rooms and cheering and punching the air and that sort of stuff. But he was a guy who, at the time, if you remember, there's questions of his temperament. Nothing against what he'd done as a player. He was absolutely fabulous. You would have Roy Keane, the player, on your side every day of the week. You'd make an all-time Sunderland 11 Roy Keane. He was a fabulous player. I loved him. But manager, it was untried, completely untried. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was interviewed by Sky on the morning that he was announced. And it was one of two times me and Niall, he didn't say eye to eye with me. It's not difficult. He's 6'4", but I was interviewed by Sky, and I said, he was just about to be announced. Roy was in the stadium, and I was outside, and I was asked, what do you think of the appointment? And I said, well, I think it'll be kill or cure. So it's going to either go one way or it's going to go the other way. And when I got in after the press conference and all the rest of our questions, Quinny came up to me and poked me in the ribs and went, kill or cure, Graeme, kill or cure. He obviously thought I should have been cheerleading and that sort of stuff, and gushing with excitement. But it was a remarkable time, because of all the people I've met in football, Roy Keane has more presence and charisma than anyone I met. He's one of those people who, when he walks into the room, all eyes are drawn to him, and it's just a presence about him. So it was a very exciting time,
I want to touch back. You said something about Sam Allardyce there, about his contract. And I remember watching an interview with Allardyce on Goals on Sunday when Keane left. Mm-hmm. And Allardyce said that he was surprised he hadn't been given the call to go to Sunderland because he would love to take the job. Do you think that's why Niall Quinn never went back for him when he seemed like a logical appointment, because he pulled out at the last minute?
I don't think Niall would probably be pragmatic enough not to sort of take his conkers in and say, well, you could have signed before, you let us down, I'm not having you in again. I don't think that would be the case. But I think, I thought, I was really disappointed when Sam left. I think if Sam hadn't left, Sunderland would still be in the Premier League now.
Absolutely.
I think he was going to go though, either way.
And I wanted him to be in the book. He's Reid's best mate. I didn't know Sam that well. I mean, I'd known him sort of not in terms. I didn't really know him that well. Never really got that close to him over the years. But I really wanted him for the book, and I tried everything I could to get him for the book. I texted him, I phoned him. I think Reid intervened on my behalf. His best mate in journalism, Neil Custis, he got in touch, but unfortunately he didn't do it. So he's Fat Sam to me from now on. He's no longer Big Sam. I call him Fat Sam. But I'd offer my cap to him in terms of what he can do with a club. What he did in such a short period of time, and it was incredible at Sunderland. And of all the managers, we had those great escapes and all the rest of it. But I'd like to have seen Sam here long term, 4 or 5 years. But unfortunately, I always for a long time I blamed Roy Hodgson. I blamed England. I thought,
Hurricane on corners, wasn't it?
And the goalkeeper, and I just thought, if that hadn't happened, if England had got through, they wouldn't be looking for a manager. Sam would have stayed. But all the evidence I get is that he would have left anyway, because the money wasn't there. This was a time where Ellis had suddenly decided, right, not putting the money in, and Sam didn't want to be doing it on a shoestring. But I think Sam would have kept him in the Premier League the following season, and I think he would have built something. Sam gets the Tony Pulis kind of criticism. Well, it's boring, it's not very exciting, it's all a bit pragmatic. But I think Sunderland fans would have settled for that. I think
I really enjoyed it. There was some games, there was like drawn at home at Bournemouth. It wasn't fun, but there was that.
But
Chelsea
every manager's going to have 1 or 2 games that are a bit drab.
Yeah,
if he was here to defend himself, Sam, what he would say is you play the cards you're dealt with. And often he's been in clubs where, but if you remember Bolton, when he had Jockey on for a while, he built an exciting to watch team. He would say, I'd like to have an exciting to watch team, but usually the jobs I get when I'm going in, I'm parachuted in, I'm being pragmatic and I'm kind of developing things. But I think he's a good fit for Sunderland. I mean, I always think sort of Newcastle fan, it'll give me stick now because I'm saying this, but I sometimes think that Newcastle fans are a bit unrealistic. You know what I mean? Sort of, and when they got rid of,
never heard that before.
Yeah, when they got rid of Sam, I think they were mid-table when they got rid of Sam. I mean, in the Premier League, that wasn't good enough. Just like when they got rid of Sir Bobby Robson when they were 5th, and Freddie Shepherd.
A lot of history being rewritten there.
Freddie, yeah, exactly, and Freddie Shepherd. Freddie, I mean, he's a saint now. But if you remember, Freddie Shepherd was said, 5th isn't good enough for this club. And
I think didn't Freddie Shepherd say it was like shooting Bambi?
I don't know. That was the thing I was Shearer, but I think if Bobby had taken them from the bottom and taken them up there. I digress. My point is about Sam. I think with Sam, it was like, they want to be the entertainers and the rest of it, and Sam wasn't their sort of manager. I think Sunderland fans would have happily have had Sam for the next 3 or 4 years. Keep him in the Premier League, establish him as a mid-table side, maybe a bit like the Bolton side once was, sort of like mid-table but looking to push a little higher. I think it was a missed opportunity that he was allowed to go, even though he didn't appear in the book.
Yeah, we're a realists club, aren't we? We would at the time have taken Allardyce to come in, spend the money as efficiently as he does, get us 11th one season, push on for 10th, and just sort of gradually build on what you've got.
Yeah,
maybe not at exactly that level of one position up per season.
Yeah,
but to improve gradually. I mean, like I say, we'll not speak too much of our friends up the road, but obviously it's we wouldn't sack a manager if he didn't get us straight to Europe. I like to think there's a certain element of realism.
Well,
I just need to build.
I agree.
Blocks.
It's certainly. I just sort of think he'd have been a good. I think he'd have been a good fit for a good few years. And I mean, when you look at what's happened since he's left, I think we'd all take that.
What is the worst interview you have ever done? And that could be worst as in you got it wrong. It could be the worst as in the person stormed out and it wasn't your fault. I mean, what is the worst?
Probably one of the very earliest interviews I did was with Sunderland had reached it was 95, I think 95, 96, but Sunderland had done well in the FA Cup. I think it was, and they were playing Manchester United. I think it was they were playing Manchester United in the Cup, and I got a chance to go down. Jeff Story was the main person at Sunderland then, and I was like his deputy, and I got a chance to go down to Man United to interview, to go to the training ground to see if I could interview players. And I was so wet behind the ears. I mean, sort of like I was an experienced news reporter. I was in my early 30s. I was an experienced news reporter, but when I first moved into sport, I was starstruck. Sort of, it's really weird, but like sort of you could talk to an MP, no problem at all, or a minister of state. But footballers, I was still a bit starstruck. And I went down to Man United, and this was at a time when Beckham and Cantona and Giggs and all these players are playing. They're huge, with superstars. So I'm standing there at the door, and I'm thinking, Right, and these players that file them past me, it's all be different now. But in those days, they would just amble past you. And all these household names. Cantona walks by, Sir Alex Ferguson walks by in conversation with Gary Pallister. And I thought, I've got to interview someone. So Giggsy came up, and I went, "All right, Ryan," and he went, "All right." And he stopped. I thought, and I had no preparation at all. So I said something like, I'm here on behalf of the Sunderland Echo. You're obviously playing Sunderland next up. I said, have you ever played against Sunderland at all, Ryan? Nope. All right. Do you know any of the Sunderland players? And I went down my list of was grasping at straws, and eventually the silence there. He had no connection with Sunderland whatsoever. And I kind of went, well, thanks for your time, Ryan. Yeah, no problem. And off he walked. I had nothing. So I'd say that's probably the worst interview I've ever done.
What about the best?
I don't know. The best interviews are the ones that you feel make a difference. I remember doing an interview with Chris Macon where I'd sort of I made that joke about when John Key used to cross the halfway line, fans used to shout "shoot," and it's because Chris Macon had gone through this spell of having really wild stabs at goal, sort of, and the fans will not say and I wrote an article saying along the lines of he'll start getting shouts of shoot if he crosses the halfway line, and then the very next game he started getting shouts of shoot. So you feel as though you're going to make a bit of a difference in that. And things like the interesting one is sometimes just simple things like there's a kind of a tendency in the game these days to what clubs call protect someone, we're protecting him. He's in the sense, if a game happens and say someone gives a penalty away or something like that, and obviously that's the person you want to interview afterwards, and you don't get, they're not wheeled up because clubs are protecting them. But that sometimes does that player a disservice, because I remember interviewing Darren Williams once. It was Darren Williams giving a penalty away, and in those days, I'm talking in the mid-90s, the press would stand outside the grounds, and as the players were coming out, they would just ask, "Can I have a word with you?" And if the player said yes, great. If the player said no, and you accepted that, you didn't take any offence. But Daz, a lot of really good young lads around the time, really good sort of the other lads, Darren Williams, Darren Holloway, Martin Smith, Michael Bridges, these sort of players who were mates, and I asked him if I'd have a word or two with him. And I said, "Can you take us through the penalty?" And he explained that as he'd gone to make the challenge, what looked like a rash challenge, his foot had actually slipped in the turf and he clattered into the lad. So I was able to put that in the paper. It's a small time. These things, these are the small. These are not spectacular stories, but these are the small ways you can make a difference a little bit week by week. I was able to put that in the paper, and that explained to fans exactly what had happened, and it helped Darren and it helped the fans as well, because rather than thinking, "Oh, he's crap and he made a rubbish tackle," they suddenly realised, "Oh well," and they gave him the benefit of the doubt. Niall Quinn, I remember, I did a Niall Quinn column for a year. I actually enjoyed doing the Kevin Phillips column. It was the longest running column. I enjoyed doing the Gary Rowell column, but I did a column with Quinny, and it was when he was crocked. And now he's St Niall, and everyone remembers and that sort of stuff. But people forget, again, long memories, short memories, and how football gets revised over the course of time. People forget when he had that injury, that he had a really sticky period where he wasn't a star. He looked like a clod horse, whatever the word is. He looked, slow and a bit of a donkey, and he several times he made comments, always very eloquent. He made comments in his column, which I could see was changing the perception in the community and was buying him time, sort of where people realised, "Oh, I hadn't realised that, and I hadn't realised that." And you can help people, in terms of, you can help players sometimes in that way. If they can explain what's actually happened, the fans will read that and they'll accept it and they'll understand. So I wouldn't point to any particular interview off the top of my head, but that was a kind of meet and drink of the Echo, and I used to enjoy doing that.
What's the worst away trip following Sunderland?
Worst away trip? I always used to hate the Midlands games. Everyone's different. I can get on a train to London and love it, and I used to enjoy the train. You can walk around. I'd hate Midlands trips. In fact, the lads used to give me stick because Stoke was one of the games I used to like covering. Remember that a few years ago when there was the Stoke game where there was snowdrifts and...
Is that James McLean scored?
I think it might have been. There was a massive snowdrift and the lads got snowed in.
Horrendous area.
Yeah, that was the one. That was the one.
I think we won 1-0.
I'd taken a holiday and avoided that one, so I was having my feet up in the Lake District next to a fire. So the banter was flying backwards and forwards. That I'd missed that trip. Chosen it well, but I didn't used to enjoy the Midlands trips. So just something I've been stuck in. I hate long car journeys, and the Midlands, the Birmingham ones are always pretty ropey. And I didn't mind the long trips away. I didn't mind the South Coast or anything like that sort of stuff. They were good fun.
Best away trip.
Best away trip for the journalist is Arsenal, Man City and Chelsea. And the reason why is because the press rooms are fantastic. And if Carla made press rooms, the Arsenal press room would be it.
Is it not Carlsberg?
Carlsberg, there you go.
Yeah.
If Carling made press rooms, it'd probably be Home Park or Burton. Yeah, probably be Burton. But no, the journalists often judge their shouldn't, but they often judge their grounds on the quality of the hospitality. And at Chelsea is like some Arabian banquet. It's like Shangri-La. You go in there, it's like and then but at Arsenal when they opened the Emirates. It's probably my favourite stadium.
I bet.
Arsenal, but everything about it is top quality.
Everything about the setup at Arsenal is just pristine.
The facilities.
They might be perpetually underwhelming, but like the actual facilities they've got.
It's brilliant. And then Arsenal always prided themselves in that way. When they were at Highbury, they always had this thing about the marble halls and the uniformed staff. They did things a bit differently. But the Arsenal, when the fixtures come out, you used to look at it as a journalist. When you're playing the top teams, what's your first game of the season? What's your last game of the season? Who you playing Boxing Day? Who you playing Christmas Day? When's the derbies? That was your journalist head on. But then sort of as your actual sort of travel correspondent head on, you're thinking Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City. I imagine the press pack are not doing that this season particularly.
What's the worst Premier League ground then?
Well, it changes, doesn't it? What
was the worst one you went to though? As a Premier League ground, like even if it doesn't exist anymore.
I can't really think off the top of my head. I mean, things like Fulham. I really liked Fulham. Craven Cottage is a lovely ground. It's a lovely away trip. That's a lovely ground to go to. I tend to just think of the good games, the fun games.
I was thinking, as an away fan,
Middlesbrough was a game I didn't used to go to because the press box was right at the back of the stand. It was a horrible place. You tend to judge your press boxes, your away grounds and the press box. That's your working environment. Southampton, the old ground. The Dell, it was like the press box was like a pigeon cree at the top, right at the back, rickety old pigeon cree. So the further away from the action they are, the harder it is to do. So I didn't like those grounds particularly. But the Stadium of Light now, I mean that is horrendous place to sort of to report on. And for me, for the journalists, it's bad enough. But for someone like you got to give credit to people like Barnsley. I hate to give credit to people like Barnsley, but you got to give credit to the radio commentators in particular because they've got to call it in real time. You've got to call it live. You know what I mean? And sometimes players are hard to distinguish as it is. You know what I mean? Sort of in a crowded box, you got to call that as it is. But no, I always just tend to judge the away grounds on the press box more than anything else.
What's it like when you do a derby then? If you're in that press, do you have a rivalry with the Newcastle United writer, or do you? That's just
not me, not personally. No. No. I mean, sort of.
Do you rub it in? Beat us.
No. I mean, my daughter's half Geordie, so so she, so I can't exactly, my better half comes from Newcastle, so it's a mixed marriage. But I mean,
that's all right. Connor's half Geordie as well.
I'm a Northumbrian.
But
I'm a full Northumbrian.
What you've got in the if you're a reporter, it doesn't matter if you're a Sunderland supporter, you can't be a Sunderland supporter and be the Sunderland Echo journalist in that way, football writer, because you quickly learn that the players and the managers won't trust you. If you're a mad fan, if you're a kind of like hugely committed fan, a lot of fans are either massively up if you win, as you should be, and massively down if you lose, which you completely expect because it's so important to them. But if you're going to do the journalist job, you've got to keep yourself on a level playing field. And I never had a problem with that, apart from sometimes the derby was a tough one because I knew how much that meant to the fans, and so the pain of a victory is like amplified, and the joy of the pain of a defeat is amplified, and the joy of a victory is amplified, sort of stuff. So that was always the one I thought was difficult to report on. But
a final one, favourite Sunderland player during your time covering the club.
I don't know. I think players I used to enjoy watching. I used to like skillful players, but I always like the ball going the back of the net. So you probably start with Phillips, Kevin Phillips as a goal scorer. It's just an absolute phenomenon. I used to enjoy watching Quinny in that sense as well. And I rated him as a footballer. Alan Johnson, but a lot of the players I was involved with when I was first starting off, it was coloured by the fact that they were mates. I thought Michael Bridges was a phenomenal player. I thought it was very sad what happened to Michael Bridges with the injury. I think he'd have been in England regular. In fact, he'd tell you that he had a shoot magazine from the time when he was sick, when he was Ballymumba's age, when he was 17. And I still remember Michael's first touch in football, where Reid, he said, it was Roker Park, I chucked him in, he was only a kid, and I forget who was in goal, but Michael was brought on as a substitute. He was on the halfway line at Roker Park, so I was just, behind him really in the press box. Long goal kick, and he cushioned it in 1 foot on the halfway line, and he just turned in one movement and ran towards goal, and had a shot, and he just missed the target. It would have been one of the most amazing debuts you could have ever had. But he was such a nice lad. His mum and dad, I knew his mum and dad, Pat Bridges, Joe Bridges, they were great people. So with a lot of these players, when you know them and you become mates with their friends and their family, you're really you're willing to do well. So I was very close to Michael. But in terms of the players to watch, I thought Johnny Evans, his spell when he was at Sunderland was absolutely phenomenal. So Steve Ball. If my pairing would probably be Steve Ball and Johnny Evans, kind of an all-time 11. But yeah, I've been lucky. I've watched a lot of bad players at Sunderland. Don't get me wrong, but I've watched a lot of good ones too.
Okay, we're all done here. So just before we sign off, I would just like to thank everyone for the support the last week we've had from the Stuart Donald podcast and the David Jones one. If you haven't listened to that, give it a listen now. I think we've pretty much hit towards probably 80,000 listens in the week by now, which is pretty impressive. So
last time I checked, it was about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Graeme, you've got like big numbers to hit there.
Exactly. Well,
yeah.
I just hope big Sam's listening.
Yeah. Cliche though it might sound, like such magnificent viewing makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it? Really, seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And we're all pretty much volunteers. Nobody really makes any money off it.
No. When you say viewing,
listening.
Yeah. Well, viewing with your ears.
We did actually have a video with Stuart Donald this time.
Did you?
Technically, it was a viewing.
Impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a camera that was just up there. But
well, he's been fantastic for you, hasn't he?
Yeah, no, he has. He's been good. Just a proper football bloke. You know, and that's how I'd describe him. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for that. Thanks, Graeme, for coming on and giving us some pearls of wisdom from your time covering the lads. And Alex,
for some pearls.
Yeah, Alex, it's been okay as always.
Yeah. As always, 6 out of 10.
Yeah, 6 at a push.
Yeah,
6 at a push.
At a push.
So yeah, thanks for listening. And we've got Bob Murray on Thursday, which I'm very excited for. I think we'll have it out on Friday morning, just so I don't want to stress myself with editing times, because my sister's actually having twins on Thursday. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know.
Congratulations.
I've got a lot of stick for that, because obviously, sister's having twins. It's like, are you going to be around? I'm like, well, not really.
Uncle Brom.
Yeah, so I think she's meant to be having them in the morning. Identical twins. It's going to be scary.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm going to have my phone off. I'm not even going to know.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, I'll get told off.
Thanks for having us, Alex. Thanks for having us, Colin.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.